representative for the Young Women's Trust, so I come to events like this and represent young women. I'm not with the Young Women's Trust tonight, I'm just me. I'm here because I want to hear what you guys have got to say. And this is my colleague, Sophie. She's a panellist. Sophie?
Hi.
This is Seelan, Whitney and James, and Sir Henry Boyle. So I'm going to be starting the debate with just a couple of facts and figures, a bit of information about what the current government has done in the last 5 years around the relevant subjects. You do have absolute free speech, but please keep it polite. And if I don't get round everyone, don't worry, because we will have an open fire question and answer session at the end. Has anybody got any questions? No? Lovely. Okay, then the first thing we're going to be debating is crime and law. So over the last 5 years, the coalition government, we've seen cuts to public services, so we've got less police officers. We've seen the destruction of legal aid for certain cases such as tribunals. So if anybody does have a problem with their employer now, they are more or less expected to go and pay for this for their court case themselves. I know that the government are saying that these kind of cases have dropped, but really when we have to pay for it ourselves now, there's not really any wonder. We've also seen introduction to things like TTIP, and we've got a lot of people now questioning the ideological war on drugs, so that was what I wanted to start off with. What do people think about the ideological war on drugs? Phelan?
The war on drugs?
Yes.
I think if we're talking about crime and drugs, I think drugs, the usage of drugs, it's gone up, but other countries are legalising certain drugs, trying to alleviate or get funds for the government. I just think our government needs to look into other ways rather than victimising drug users and putting them in a bad light, instead of trying to work out ways of reducing drug usage and trying to find other ways where crime and drug link. That's what I think. They should need to find different ways instead of just hitting hard, trying to just arrest people, labelling them as bad people in society. So yeah.
We should see why those young people go into doing drugs and crimes. It's because they have nothing else to do, and especially young people. After school, they're just left on the street. And in other countries, when you see there's youth clubs, there's sports clubs for them to be engaged in, and the UK doesn't have that. I come from France, and there was so many youth clubs. Youth were busy 24 hours 7. Here, they're just left on the street up to their doing their own good, up to no good, and the government should address that by starting up youth clubs and promoting community spirits. And so that's where the government is failing. I don't know where the money is going, but it's definitely not towards improving the crime or why young people are into crime and drugs.
I agree with that, but I feel like we've been saying we need more youth clubs for years, and it's not like we haven't really been bringing that in. I feel like there have been more youth clubs, but people just don't go. I think it's more in terms of education. I think people need to understand. People do get the problems with drugs, but I feel like from a young age we need to start talking about it, maybe in schools. But I feel like youth clubs, I don't think it works. I feel like we've had it for years. We say the same thing every year: more youth clubs, more sports clubs. But it's up to them if they want to go to it.
Yeah.
That needs to be affordable, and that's the thing. Sports is not cheap here, and if you make it more affordable, in my area there's no youth club, for example. There's no youth club, there's no sports club where I'm from. So for me, you saying that youth clubs are quite common is quite a shock, because I come from an area where I see people on the road at chicken shops. So it needs to be more affordable.
Yes, absolutely.
I think also when you look at what it starts with home, then it's school, then it's after school, it's the friends, peers, whatever. But I think it doesn't start at home properly. I think there's cases where parents, or they're not being as strict, or giving more advice on drugs, because you can see, I think a lot of parents use drugs themselves, so children see it's okay, especially especially, I'm not trying to prejudice, but like such lower class, maybe on estates, people that got access easier because obviously other people are doing it, so they feel they can do it as well. It's more acceptable. So to get out of that, the government, the police, they need to find more initiative to start it from home, because when they've got that environment at home and come to school, they're all going to have the same mentality. So to break that mentality, something needs to be found. I know other countries, Norway, Denmark, Germany, I've been to all these countries. The youth's mentality there is so different to what we have here. Here it's more about looking cool on the streets, not owning nice cars, having a nice girlfriend, boyfriend, flashing money. There it's not even about that. There, they do more social things, as in, I don't know, go to certain places, do sports, whatever. It's in their mentality. I think if we need to change drugs and all this, we need to change the mentality from a young age, because I think kids don't have their priorities set straight. A lot of kids, they have priorities on other things. So if we start at a young age, the government, they can do so much, but they need to think of other ways. It's not embarrassing to look at other countries for help, asking. I think that's a problem in this country. We look at other countries, we say, oh, this is bad, this is bad. We don't actually say, okay, listen, let's go to advisors, let's go to their health minister, let's go to their education minister, their children's minister. Let's ask them what kind of initiatives they've used, because I think we're like, oh, we think we're high society, we think we're better than all the other countries, but we're not. In polls, we come lower than countries with, who are more poorer than us, with low GDP. I think our education system isn't as great as it could be, even though we're one of the top countries that our economy is very good. So we need to change our mentality from a young age, and I think that's what's crucial, rather than sports clubs, whatever. It's the mentality. I don't know. They need to find a way to change that.
Then in regards to the mindset and sports clubs and youth clubs, that's not a role for the government to play. I think I think we're asking the government to play too big of a role, especially with a Conservative government in power, which is against a big state, to then ask a government which is against a big state to create institutions which kind of favour a big state isn't really going to work. So things like mindset, that's not a role for the law to play. That the law cannot give you a mindset, if you know what I mean. It's really up to the parents to create this mindset. Yes, the government can put in place like certain programs which will enable parents to shape their children in a certain type of way, but the law can't do that. That's more education. There's only so much the law can do.
Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm actually from the Liberal Party, not the Liberal Democrats. Completely different organisation. I'm really sad that there aren't representatives of other parties here, because we politicians always bang on about why aren't young people voting, why aren't they engaged. Old Uncle Tom Cobley and all can't be bothered at least to send a representative. So I'm very grateful that you've invited me here today. I'm here as much to listen as to put forward my views, because it's only by listening to what people's concerns are that politicians, or at least my view, that politicians can actually design legislation, or better still remove legislation which is unnecessary. Having got the party political broadcast out of the way, I'll now answer the question. And I'll try and confine it to the crime end, because as we've already demonstrated, so many topics on our list today are actually linked up in more than one way, which is quite right, which is how life works. So I'll try and just confine myself to the crime end of it. Very, very, very disappointed that the government has effectively restricted access to justice to people of wealth. And this is in the non-criminal court, although there's problems with legal aid there, but certainly the legislation that came into force last week, which restricts people's access to civil courts, is something for me that's absolutely appalling. So if we go round to one of the big fat cat places, I won't name names, around about 3 minutes walk away from here around Liverpool Street, fine, I can put up £10,000 and I can prosecute somebody, but if I've got a problem or you've got a problem, we probably haven't got access to huge amounts of money, so access to justice is denied by this government, which makes a great play of fairer society, I think is one of their slogans. The other little bit, if I could just finish, please tell me to be quiet if I'm going on too long. The other little thing I want just to mention is drugs in the criminal sense, and I'm rather encouraged by James at the end with his comments, but I just want to tell you that our party policy is radically different from others. When we talk about drugs, we normally are talking about non-prescription drugs. So drugs that people buy for other reasons and that we loosely put under the title of recreational drugs, which of course covers a whole range of different things. Now, the two most dangerous recreational drugs available in the UK at the moment are alcohol and tobacco. Way more damaging to people's health. I won't go down the health issue just yet, we'll talk about that later. Way more damaging. So, we take a very pragmatic approach. We would like to see heroin legalised. I'll repeat that, just in case you thought your ears were confusing you. We would like to see heroin legalised, and through a system of licensed availability, in the same way that alcohol and tobacco is, because the truth of the matter is at the moment we are criminalising people who actually need assistance, and I won't go down the health route just yet. But what we do is try to put them on methadone programs, and if you know anything about health, you will know that methadone is actually far more dangerous even than heroin. So there we are, I've chucked in a contentious point very deliberately early on, and I'm happy for you to come back at me with any questions or disagreements. Shall I be quiet now? Yeah, I will.
I wouldn't disagree. I was aware that alcohol and tobacco were a lot more dangerous than heroin and cannabis, etc. You know, when you say legalise heroin, it sounds really, don't do that. But I think you're right. When you look at the actual facts, heroin isn't as dangerous, so why not? Because we've been drinking alcohol for all these years and damaging our health with that. So that's great. Moving swiftly on, gender equality. A couple of facts and figures. The number of young women not in education, employment or training has been consistently higher than the amount of young men not in education, employment or training for over a decade. So that's a massive inequality, not necessarily caused by the Conservative government, but I certainly don't think they've helped it. A YouGov attitude survey found that 66% of people tend to agree or strongly agree that sexism still exists in the workplace. I've had experience of sexism in the workplace. These figures show that inequality is very real in our society. We did see a Conservative shake-up which saw a lot more women on sort of the front bench representing the Conservatives. And I know that I met Sal Brinton, who is the Liberal Democrat president, and she is very passionate about gender equality. She spoke about how she had a really good role model in her suffragist cousin, and that were really inspiring stuff. Soph, you're really passionate about gender equality?
Yes. Well, like you, I had also lots of discrimination at work. When I was a young woman without any qualifications, I was asked to work for free for a week in the name of training, then for a week later to be sacked and to say, well, we got a man who can do the same job as you, and because you're a woman, young woman, we don't know when you're going to have a baby or when you're going to get married, so bye-bye. And then when I got my qualification, I got the same treatment again. And then I became a young mom. And so in the interview, when I went to interview, they asked me, what is the biggest achievement? And I said, it was having a young child and going to uni at the same time. Me being naive, I just said what was my biggest achievement in an interview. And you could see the atmosphere changing completely as soon as I said that. And when I asked for feedback, that was one of the reasons why I wasn't selected, even though I was doing good in all the others things they were looking for. They said, you have a young family and we want someone who can be here permanently. But they didn't say that being a young mom means you have your whole career without taking a break anymore. That young woman can give so much initiatives and creativity to the workplace. They don't see that. And in your household, you know, the household is, you have the head, which is the man, and you have the neck. But the head won't move without the neck. So when, for example, your mother or your wife goes on holiday, the household is not run properly. So even if that small household can't function without a woman being there, how can a society or workplace can function without a woman? And so why can't we cultivate this woman when they're young, when they're full of potential, in the prime, to let the society grow and the workplace grow? I know I've done my bit. My employees are quite happy that they employed a young mom and a young woman, and they've seen the results of it, and now they want young women. And so I urge the society, the government and the employers to consider young women.
I won't reprise what splendid suggestions have come out. I agree with most of it. Let's pick up the last point first. I'm always happy to applaud other parties when they're doing good things. So I certainly applaud the Labour Party for proposing 25 hours, and I urge them publicly to now bite the bullet and sign up to our policy, which is 40 hours, because it's absolutely vital. Two other quick things on this, if I may. There is an attitudinal problem, particularly with white Anglo-Saxon Protestant males of my age, because that's how people have been brought up, quite wrongly, but that's how people have been brought up. But that doesn't mean that people can't change. I just want to give you a quote from, I'm going to tell you who it was. It was somebody in UKIP, so you might not be surprised at this. They said, "I'm all for female equality, providing they remember their place," which I think pretty well sums up, you know, what we're up against. The other thing I'd like to mention that's really important is about young mums with young families. One of the companies, it's an events and conferences and exhibitions company, one of the companies of which I'm a non-executive chair, we employ, I think it's about 90% of women. And we absolutely positively encourage young mums to come back. We have all kinds of arrangements where we seek to help them work at home, where we completely rearrange their job schedules so that they continue to do it. And do you know what? It delivers money to our bottom line because they are innovative, they are creative, they are in touch with the real world because they're young mums. And it's just absolutely brilliant. And I cannot understand why other employers, some are very good, but I cannot understand why still some employers just simply don't grasp the facts, which are very plain and obvious. The very last bit I want to mention, because we're on gender equality, and we've talked a lot about women, I just want to have a quick word about lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans people, because that, for me, comes under the heading of gender. And I see quite a lot of people, and hear quite a lot of people from the LGBT community who also experience quite a lot of prejudice, glass ceilings, pigeonholing. So let's not forget all of that group as well as the women that we're quite rightly talking about. Thank you.
Absolutely. In November 2010, the debt to GDP ratio was 53.5%. December of last year, it was 80.4. In case anybody doesn't know, a low ratio would indicate that the country's inhabitants have no problem paying back their debts, and they earn enough to consume and pay back what they owe. George Osborne also claimed he would have eradicated the deficit by 2015, which he hasn't done. And also over the last 5 years we've seen a lot of arguments about money creation and the banks having the power to create money. With regards to taxes, we've had cuts to in-work benefits such as tax credits, the bedroom tax, which is absolutely draconian, and the HSB tax scandal, I've got wrote down there with accusations of political cover-ups in the House of Commons. We did also see the rise in VAT to 20%, but we do have to earn more before we pay tax now. What do you think about money creation then, Henry?
Can I just ask a question to everybody? If I had a stack of £5 notes, I used to say pound notes, but that dates me. If we had a stack of £5 notes and I put it in the middle of the floor and it went up to the ceiling, would anybody be able to tell me if it was 5 billion, 10 billion, 100 billion? No, because the figures are too vast for us to comprehend. Could anybody explain to me, for instance, what our current public sector borrowing requirement is, or indeed what it is in essence? Can anybody actually say that, although the figures that you've quoted are indeed accurate, can anybody say what they mean in practice? The answer is probably not.
No.
Economists might well be able to, and if you get half a dozen economists in a room, you'll get at least 12 different views before tea time, and then another half a dozen after tea time. The fact of the matter is that we are bamboozled with these almost unbelievable numbers. And the fact of the matter is that the UK is still, depending which measure you use, either the 6th or the 7th richest country in the world. The fact of the matter is that conservative, and I use a capital C this time, conservative government cutting is simply resulting in pressure on the poor to a colossal and, in my view, obscene degree. The Liberal Party is still very much wedded to Keynesian economics, which some of you may know is sometimes summed up and ridiculed as tax and spend. We now tend to include that lovely phrase quantitative easing, which when I first heard it I thought it was some kind of cure for a bunged up colon, but that's maybe a slightly rude way of describing it. If I said to you today, I will authorise the Bank of England to print another £100 billion worth of money, assuming I'm Chancellor of the Exchequer, that really would have very little effect on the world other than to chuck some more money into the system. Now, this is what all countries do, but it's the principle on which you base your economic philosophy, which is something that has changed dramatically over my lifetime. When I was your age, no jokes please, when I was your age, the Conservative Party had a particular philosophical view, as some of it we heard still today, you know, small state, non-interference, and the logical extension of that is the American Tea Party wing of the Republican Party in America. They're entitled to their views, I disagree fundamentally with them. The Labour Party used to have a much more inclusive philosophy. The Liberal Party had and has a much more liberal and open mixed market philosophy. What has happened in certainly the last 20, maybe 25 years, is that most of the mainstream parties have economically moved to what I'll call the right wing. So now the centre ground is actually what we used to call the right wing. So everybody's shifted over. My own particular party has, if anything, moved a little bit further to the left, because we're very happy to say tax and spend, to kickstart the economy, to pay for 40 hours a week for young mums and young dads, let's not dismiss them, because it's always the case, and even Conservatives have to accept this, that if you invest, you expect to get a return on your investment. That's what capitalism is all about. So if you accept that capitalism does have some place to play in the UK economy, then you must apply the same logic to the state as you do to private capital. So we would very happily say, yes, we're going to slash a lot of what we don't believe in. I've already mentioned nuclear submarines, but we'd be very happy to pump prime with printed money a lot of other enterprise. I'm very happy that the Tory government, so coalition government, forget the Condems for a moment, have managed to raise the threshold at which people pay income tax. That's a good thing. But on the negative side of the balance sheet is that, as the Labour Party say, and I entirely agree with them, on the negative side, it's actually net resulted in about £1,100, per average family, about £1,100 a year worse off. So the Lord giveth with one hand and the Lord taketh away a little bit more with the other hand.
I think I'm the only person maybe in this room that I'm Conservative, and I think they've done a brilliant job personally with the economy. I feel like people tend to overlook what we as a party, so I'm going to say we because I love the Conservatives, what we as a party have done. I feel like people forget, so income tax, for about 24 million people, income tax has been slashed. About 2 million of the lowest payers are no longer even paying it. I feel like we've done so much, and people just don't see it, don't recognise it. And I think the economy right now is we've come out of a recession, and we're only in that recession because Sir Henry, all your policies seem like you just like to spend, but like I feel like I don't know where the money's coming from. People forget that when you want more of this, that money needs to come from somewhere else.
The last 5 years we've seen tuition fees rising, we've seen the scrapping of the education maintenance allowance. The numbers in further education have fell, but the coalition government have raised the age of staying in education to 18, which I am a fan of that. I'm a fan of that, yeah, definitely. Whitney, did you have something you wanted to say about education? No, that's not you.
Well, I'll answer the last question. Definitely, a lot of people have been put off at university by the fees.
Yeah.
I mean, facts.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Nothing much to say about that.
What I'd like to say about this is, I think a lot of students they're put off by education because of the large fees. I think the government or the education establishments, they need to look at ways of not having these fees up front. Let's say, they work out an initiative to say we'll subsidise the fees more, or not have it in your face like, oh, you have to pay £100 to study 5 years in this university. Break it down, or find initiatives to find, to not have this upfront massive payment. Because obviously the future of the country is young people going into education, becoming lawyers, whatever. So they need initiatives to get into education, not be scared, especially people from lower class, lower income households. I think they'll find it difficult. They're going to think, like, you know, they've got the talent to become a lawyer or a doctor, they just don't have the funds, and they'll just be put off, you know. So I think they need to be explained, or they need to find ways to create that excitement. Say, oh, if you go here, you know, you won't be charged as much. But I think it's just in your face. I don't think it's acceptable, the amount of fees the university is asking for.
And I also think when we talk about this, we tend to forget about people that don't want to go to university. University is not necessarily for everyone.
Yeah.
And I feel like for those people, yeah, okay, we've had 1.8 million maybe more apprenticeships, I think it was. But I still think that there is a gap for those who don't. This government has, they've kind of put a negative label on soft subjects, like that it's not as good as those subjects that you go to university for.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's definitely a big problem in education.
Yeah.
As I said, you know, the other countries, we need to start following other countries' examples. In Germany, I've got cousins who aren't the brightest of kids, but they've got jobs now. They're in, you know, good income jobs, because how the system works is this is your kind of your level of education. They'll steer you towards, or they'll guide you towards jobs which are linked to what you're good at.
Yeah.
So in Germany, you see most of the kids, they'll go straight into jobs. They'll filter out kids who, you know, want to go doctors, engineers, whatever, and then the kids who've got middle level local office jobs, whatever, and they all get jobs. It's just in this country we don't have that system where we, you know, look at the kids and we say, listen, you'd be more suited to have a job like this or that. We don't have that in this country, such as other countries. We don't follow the example, and obviously it's very successful in those countries. Why can't we do that? That's why I think we need to look more into having a system where we can identify, you know, that shows the kids that we're more involved. Because the kids nowadays, they just think, oh, we're going to school, and there's no one to look after us, and we have to go to uni if we, you know, it's our own choice. But I think we should need more of an involvement from carers, you know. At school I had a careers advisor. I hardly saw him, you know. I think they should be more involved to say, listen, these are the grades you're getting, try going to these jobs, try applying for this, try doing this. I don't get that at all. I think we need to have a system where, you know, even from year 10, well, we say give 2 weeks of work experience. Instead of that, we should say, listen, if you do this, if you go for work experience, if you talk to these companies, if you get a mentor in a company, you need to start, like, they'll give you steps to achieve getting a job. That's the goal at the end of the day. We don't have that in this country. We don't have any kind of involvement from anyone. It's all up to us, and I think that's what it is. It's just we feel like it's just all us. That's even why we're here today, because obviously we don't have the opportunity. Then no one's giving it to us. It's only the cream of the crop. People who are confident, people who want to get it. What about people that can't? You know. So I think we just need more involved from a young age.
What we need to do is look at local job markets and provide the training. So in local colleges, if manual labour is the local market, then provide the training to all the students there. With manual jobs, then you don't have to bring immigrants from other countries to do your manual jobs. You've got the training given at colleges. And the other thing, as pointed by Siran, was that it's not always about education. Work experience is so much more important while you're studying. And we're giving so much emphasis on studying, but when you're going to jobs, interviews, what they want is experience.
Yeah.
And you're never told that at university. When you're 16, they never tell you that. When you're in your first year of A-level, just before applying for your university, they never tell you that. And for me, I had to discover it myself. I had careers advice, and they were useless. They were telling me that I needed to do another course because I didn't want to be a doctor, or I didn't want to be stuck in a lab. So they said I need to do another course. But I was like, no, I want a job at the end of this degree. I don't want to spend money on it. So I had to do lots of, you know, self-taught myself to approach hospital, approach consultants individually, and emailing them, please can you give me experience? Please can you give me work experience? And that experience now landed me in a good job that I'm doing right now, which is not what the careers advice would have advised me, because they're not aware of it. All they know is that if you're female, you're good for nursing, social care, childcare. If you're male, you're good for lawyers, finance. That's all they know. And we need to be taught at a young age that experience is important, and at the right ages, so at 16, schools need to accommodate work experience. Then the first year of A-level, just before university, they need again to be they need to accommodate work experience. And the second year of university, which is when there's lots of internships and work experience available, they need to be prompted to apply for this work experience, and that's not being done at the moment.
I don't even think you need an education to get a job. You can, kids that drop out 13, 14, there's plenty of them. Get them into, you know, don't necessarily pay them, just get them into something, you know, train them at something, because we've all got the capacity to do things, we just don't choose to. Everyone's got the capacity to do a job. We just need to get them into training them, even if it's the most menial job, as in it could be this stacking shelves, whatever. Just train them into something. We just don't have that thing where let's get our kids doing things. It's just let's just educate them, and they'll apply for jobs as soon as they get the grades. Don't even think about why do they need grades. Like, you know, education. Okay, education obviously increases our general knowledge, whatever, or competency. But at the end of the day, like, you can train as for a job specific role. You don't need to learn maths, you don't need to learn engineering to do certain things. Just train them. There's not that training. I know apprenticeships are there, whatever, but we're not, that's just, I don't know anyone, I don't have any friends, or I don't have any relative, anyone that I know who's got an apprenticeship. You know, so that means, like, out of all the people I know, no one's got one, so what does that show? That, like, not even one person got it, so it's not accessible to everyone, not everyone knows about it. It needs to be in legislation. If kids are dropping out of school, get them into a job. Because at the end of the day, that's what they need, right? They need a job, not sitting at home getting income. You know?
Did you want to say something then?
Yeah, I mean, a recent EU Commission study found out that England actually had the lowest number of secondary school children who could speak another, like a foreign language. So that's just ridiculous. That we cannot be churning children out of the education system who cannot actually get jobs. That needs to be fixed.
Some of them leave primary school and they can't even read. It's terrible.
And then my final point on apprenticeships, which has been something we've been speaking a lot on, the problem with apprenticeships is that it's not a British thing, it's a German, it's a Swiss thing. And it's something which we're trying to copy, but I think we're copying it very wrong, because the ONS put out statistics that said more than half of people who do apprenticeships actually don't leave with a level 2. That's pathetic. Like, that's not what you're meant to be doing an apprenticeship for. You're meant to be doing an apprenticeship so that you can actually come out more qualified than come out with the same qualification as someone who's read Wikipedia. You know what I mean? So we have to be, we literally have to be taking these steps, because you look at Germany, you look at Switzerland, like, these guys do an apprenticeship for 4 or 5 years and they come out just solid. And that's what we need to be epitomizing. Like, the people who do apprenticeships need to come out just on top. However, they don't do that, and that again, that's another problem which we have to look at. But the good thing is that it's getting to the point where we are actually having these conversations, because if you look at why the government used to push for people to go into education, is we had the war, people had died, and then you needed people to go to university and quickly just get these things so they could go out into the workforce. However, that's no longer the case, and because it's got to the point where actually you need people who are learning transferable skills which you can bring to the workplace. We're now having this conversation, and I feel like in the next 5 to 10 years, things will be at a better stage. But we just need to do that at a much quicker rate.
I just wanted to ask a question for the audience, because you guys are drifting the more. How could you improve things education-wise for the kids up there? What do you think needs to be done to the audience who was talking before about the poverty in the north?
I believe it's down to jobs and it's like when the pits were open, the war community, everyone developed, so we're a lot. Nobody seems to struggle, but there isn't no jobs up there now, so there's nothing to put people in, there's nothing to take them out of poverty. They're only going in a downward spiral, they're never going to be able to come up and simple, like you said, we find some very interesting sort of manufacturing art.
That's what I think. Even if we do train these kids, right, we just don't, where are we supposed to send them off to? We don't have any work. That's the thing. I think that comes back to employment, whatever. We just don't have where any outlet to send these to. We can train them, whatever. Like in Germany, they can do that because they have massive factories. They've got all the car manufacturers, all the planes, all the trains, everything's there. That's what they can send them off to the factory to train when they're 15, 16. We don't have that here. We don't have factories, so we could educate the children, but we need someone to send them to work.
Question. Do you think education has become a halfway house? So basically, there's not enough jobs out there. So when kids leave college, though London or the UK can't accommodate them in the workforce, so they're like, you know what, go uni, stay there for a couple of years, we can't really accommodate you in the real world yet.
It's just to get through
amass
life,
all
right?
these loans and whatever, when you come out, maybe we'll have something for you. And the thing is, in the 90s we had polytechnics, probably before then. Now scrapping those was probably the dumbest thing we ever did, because that was basically apprenticeships without the bad stigma attached to it. That was where you could actually learn a trade or something and get your degree and actually go and do your job. But scrapping those, I don't even know why we scrapped them, I was too young to even understand it, I guess. That's removed the, how do you say, ambition, the working ambition of people. Because no one really learns trades anymore. Everybody wants to be a banker or a lawyer. No one's actually functionally knowledgeable, if that makes any sense. You can't actually do things with your hands. So we're out here training more people to do the same jobs that already exist, forgetting that we need certain things to survive. And when you go to uni and learn these things, you don't get that job you was sure the world was saying that's good for you, we're left a worse position than we were before. So I think education has kind of become this dream which we're telling our young people, go to uni and learn this, I promise you're going to become that. But when you come out, you don't get that job. You're not really told there's other places in the world for you to go. You're told that what you've learned is where you're supposed to be. You're not really told that outside there's a whole bigger world out there for you to go and spread your wings. So when London's coming cramped, it's all a cycle in my opinion. It's cramped through whatever, employment, education, housing, whatever. We're not instilling in young people that there's a world out there for you. That go and see, go and learn, go and do.
Yeah.
A lot of young people leave uni and go straight into jobs and then get old and realize, oh crap, I didn't get to live my life, or I didn't get to do or explore stuff.
Yeah.
And they're not told that actually, take a gap year, go travel, do something like that. You know, all these bad stigmas attached to living your life, especially in lower income families,
Yeah.
because they're just told, no, go you to get a good grade and I promise you'll be okay, you know. Nah, that's not always the case, because in the long term, you're going to regret that decision. So I think education needs to instill something, almost a vocational aspect in it. More than just the whole degree, more than actually embrace a bit of go and do stuff in the meantime. Education is still here, but if you can take a gap year, sell that to them. Use that gap year to do something that you want to do in the midst of your education. You come back fresher, and you leave uni with a bigger perspective for what you want to be. That's my opinion.
But is that for the government to do or for the
I
parents?
think government, no, it's not, the parents don't really, no, I think government takes, governments are parents just as much as our parents are. Face facts. No, let me explain why I said that. Because I'm a black British, okay? So I'm basing this on my experience growing up here, there and here. My mother, while she instilled in me what she could only do so due to what she had around her. So i.e. if her job could afford her time to say, yeah Jay, go do this, I'd go do this, you know what I'm saying? So if she's coming home every night, 9 p.m. from a job, because she's got to earn, because her job's not paying as much as she needs to provide for family, she can't tell me, go travel, go do it. She can't tell me that. She's gonna tell me, you know what Jay, all I can say is that you can benefit from your education. But if the government says, actually we recognize there's a huge problem in young people in terms of them going to school and not really getting what they want, why don't we give them an incentive to go out and travel and see what else is out there for them? I think the government has because that's education in itself.
Yeah.
You can't tell them that traveling and all that's not education. It is, because how would they survive in the world if they don't know about the world?
But still, I still think that's a role for the parents, I think.
No, again, a parent can only do so much, but when they're out of the home and they're in school, which they spend a lot of their time in, by the way, and the government has a hand in that institution, you can't tell me the government can't put something. I'm not saying take all the responsibility, but you can't tell me that in an assembly or in a lesson, in a social science lesson, you can't tell me they can't implement something in curriculum to say, go out there and do something. Or there's, for example, there's exchange programs that allow you to go across the world and Camp America, TFL, whatever. You can't tell me they can't plug those in. To say they can't is kind of like...
Well, they introduced a station, I'm too old to do it, but recently introduced citizenship classes, haven't they?
Mm.
So they could, instead of, I don't know, if they've introduced that, why can't they introduce something to learn about, work and telling people in those classes, this is what's out there for you. This is educating them outside of what education is, as in maths, science, whatever. Educate them about what the world is, right? This is how you get a job. This is how you apply for jobs. This is what you do, because you need to set them up. We're not setting our kids up to get jobs. End of the day, that's what we all want to do: get a job, right? Because that's how life works. We need a job to earn money to pay for stuff, right? So we don't have that. People instilling in us that priority. Like kids nowadays don't have that. Like as in certain schools, schools like private schools or schools with high academic results, they will say, listen, this is they have that. They have that saying, oh, listen, if you study this, you get these grades, you go here, you can do this, you can do, and they have a set. But more public schools get through year 7 to year 11, leave. That's it. That's it. It's just a system to them. It's just a system to them. It's just I don't think I think the government have more of a say in the public schools, because obviously private schools they earn money, right? People pay to go to private schools, so they feel they have more of a responsibility to get these kids a job, because the thing is, it shouldn't be just money to get that. The government should feel, oh, we need to set these kids up more, but we don't have that.
Year in industry, year abroad scheme.
Yeah, but it's not working, is it? It's not working.
They are working. Those things work.
Yeah.
Those things definitely
majority-
work.
No,
Just
I think
how many people know about this opportunity.
exactly the majority of people, people. You're from London, London. We've got more opportunities
I'm
because
not
it's,
from London.
no. But I'm saying if you go further up north, you go to rural areas or places.
I'm talking about
It's just it's not.
university.
Yeah, the
it's
universities
a
up there
scheme
allow
in
you to do
your
that.
course.
Yeah.
People who
I'm
study,
saying we should
people
instill it from a
study-
younger age. It should be
Yeah.
from a younger age.
Yeah.
Only certain people can get into university, or that's. I think it should be a younger age. Year 9, 10, year 11.
Yeah, I do agree with what you're saying. It should be at a much younger age.
Yeah.
When I was in secondary school, I would say maybe 14, 15 years old, I got the opportunity to go to Spain as a foreign exchange. And it did instill in me, the knowledge that there is a larger world, and all my decisions are based on, okay, I can go and do something in another country, I have that ability, and it opens up your mind to that. That was a privilege because my secondary school was a language, specialised in language, so we had to compulsory study a language. So I think it's something that should be mapped out to other schools, secondary school level.
I too had that opportunity, and my school wasn't a language school. But what I'm saying, it is open.
Yeah.
It's definitely open. People just.
I just don't think
I
there's
think
enough.
it's actually
I
a
don't
culture.
think it's-
It's a culture.
I don't
There's
think
a
it's
culture
enough.
in this country where we're just quite lazy.
Yeah, but
You
culture-
don't want to read. You don't want to know
Yeah, but
what's
culture
going on.
comes from
You don't want to know
what's
you're-
around you.
No, do you know how much?
culture?
Do you know how much your schools offer you? How much your universities offer you? People just
Like,
ask.
culture comes from what's around you. What is culture? It's what's around you. It's what you learn from what's around you. If there's nothing of that around you, then you're not going to get that culture. If you've got that culture, so let's say you have that culture in a school. Your school has a culture of everyone in the school goes to a good uni, gets a good job, will put you in this place. Not all schools have that, so that culture
I'm not
isn't
talking
there.
about the culture of the school. I'm talking about the culture of the nation.
Yeah, that's still a culture. That's still that adds to the culture. That adds to the culture. So if that culture's not there in school, how is it going to be anywhere else?
So what do you want the government to do about that?
Yeah.
Put more as they introduce citizenship. Why can't they introduce?
That's what I'm saying. It's
Why
instant. People
can't
just
they?
don't read it.
No, but the thing is, if you need to sit down with these kids.
It's more that it's read, or it's not presented in a way that.
It's exactly. It's
how
not.
you're gonna read it.
Yeah.
So
I
if
mean,
you
That's what I'm
want,
saying. It's your
Well, you know, wait,
so that
initiative.
you need to do research yourself.
No, they give it to you.
taught by
Do you know
No,
what's
I-
funny? Do you know what's funny? In the beginning of my course, we were given a handbook. No one opens the handbook. The handbook has absolutely everything in it. How they want you to get the best grades, how they want you to reference, how they want.
Well,
the
why?
opportunities they
That's
offer
the
you.
form. That's
Do you want
the
them to see
media
how
of.
old? How
No.
old are you?
Again, you're taking me too literally here when I say spell it out. I'm not saying
Yeah.
spell it out,
Yeah.
but humans are naturally driven by the end result. What is in it for us? Now, if you go into a school and you say, "Look, do this course because you're going to get this job." In fact, if you ask young people today why they want to be bankers, what would they tell you?
Money.
Now you tell someone, okay, who wants to be in the arts, for example, if you do this course, it will take you across the world because in this art form you can be known, blah, 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 blah. You think they won't want to travel? Hell yes. So if you go into a course, you got to give them a more succinct, more colourful reason. You can't just tell them, do this course, you become a great banker, blah, blah, blah. No, there's got to be something more...
Something solid.
Something solid. We need that. We need that.
I think you're putting too much on the government.
Again, like I told you, it's the parents and the government. The government is saying that. The government is saying that.
I think it's a strong subject because as youth, this is what we've recently gone through or we're going through right now. So it's of your view, because obviously you're coming from a conservative point of view, you're saying let's make a smaller state, whatever. Like
No,
you don't want the government to be as involved. You want
It's not that. It's a fundamental belief that if I want something, I go and get it.
Exactly.
No, but the thing is, not everyone's like that. That's not everyone's like that. Why are you setting it up? Why are you making people? No, but the thing is, why does everyone have to go do that? Why can't you put it in front of me? Why can't you say, instead of working for this guy, give me
No,
cash?
because there's a reason why those at the top should be at the top because they
Yeah, but
work for it.
but the thing is, set everyone else up. set everyone else up as well. Why
No, everyone is given a level playing field. If I choose to open
there is no playing field right now. That's
No,
the
I'm
whole
talking
point.
about in school. I'm talking about in school.
No,
in my school.
My
we
point
will
is
sit
there is
across
no
from
playing
each other,
field
and I'm
right now.
telling you.
That's it. There is no playing field. Kids don't have that. Kids don't have the opportunity. Kids don't have the training or the incentives or the thing in front of them. If a teacher got in front of me, I had in my whole life in university, I mean in school, the career is about, I must have seen him once to ask him about my 2 weeks thing. If there was a thing where he came in every 2 weeks and said, listen, whoever wants to be doctors, this is the kind of grades you need. This is the kind of thing. If you want to be an engineer, this is the kind of. Kids don't get that. The kids say, math, science. Yeah, but I'm saying they need to have that environment. They need to have the culture.
I got that in my school.
Every school doesn't have that. I went to grammar school. I went to good school, but not everyone has that.
I went to a failing school and I had to go out my way and find out about the opportunities which are there.
Why do you have to do that? Why do you have to do that?
Because that's life. That's life.
Do you know what?
Why can't we make? No, but you said that's life. Why can't we say in 10 years? Why can't we say in 10? No, but why can't we say in 10 years? That is life.
Moving on then, unemployment.
Wait, meritocracy is an important value in our society. You work for what you want.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm saying let's give people more opportunity. I'm saying give them more of an opportunity. The opportunities aren't as there. They're not there. That's what I'm saying.
Right, unemployment then, we've already mentioned a little bit. I'll come to you in a second, sorry. Unemployment, we've already mentioned a little bit then, so we're seeing
Do you want
sort
to
of
ask? No, do you know what else, Mrs. Henry, about this? What he feels about what we've said?
I said earlier that I'm here as much to listen as and I've heard some from all points of view, some really good points today, and I'm going to take some of them back and have a think about them. I'm not going to give a knee-jerk reaction. I'd like to make just a very quick point. It all starts with young children.
That's what I'm saying.
And primary schools, and I do some work with primary schools, it is, I think as Whitney said, it's an absolute scandal that we have such a high percentage of children coming out of primary schools not able to read and write. Now, I've done some studies about this, and one of the reasons is that particularly children from poorer backgrounds, and I'm talking about really poor backgrounds, and that's not just urban areas, that's non-urban as well. The parents or the parent or carers can't afford to pay to give them a breakfast. So they go to school hungry and are not able to absorb basic learning. Now, I initiated a scheme about 10 years ago with some primary schools in the east of London to say we need to make a facility available for all children. I'm not going to select it on ability to pay. For all children to turn up at 7:30 in the morning and to have a free breakfast. How are we going to pay for that? Well, I said let's talk to local companies, and I don't care if it's big supermarkets. I want the money out of them, please. Subsidise it. So the trays will have Sainsbury's or Tesco's or something stamped on them. I don't care. The kids get something to eat. And it's amazing the number of children now who leave those pilot schools able to read and write, which allows them then to go on. I'm not going to reprise the conversation we've had. I'm very pleased to say that although it was a Liberal idea, it's been taken up by other parties and its local authorities, of course, who have the major say in state education. And I'm very happy to see that one of the Labour parties, in fact, is trumpeting it as their idea, and it's now being paid for by council tax. I'm delighted. I'm interested in the outcomes. I'm not interested in little badges saying I did it. I think that should be rolled out throughout the country, because that's the bedrock of what education starts at. The other very quick thing about national vocational qualifications for those who don't want to pursue an academic career, and I would suggest that's probably the majority of people. I did some pilot schemes about 20 plus years ago when national vocational qualifications were being introduced first, and at that stage it was very much focused on people learning to do things, practical things, not academia, not writing many essays and not providing reams of paper to their moderators or what have you. I'm very sad that national vocational qualifications now move much more to an academic level of producing lots of bits of paper and lots of writing, because that for me defeats the entire object of it. But I'm doing some work at the moment with Larkin and Dagenham College, because the construction industry in this country is crying out for qualified plumbers, builders, plasterers, roofers, all of that. We haven't got enough people in the country to fulfil those jobs. Somebody said earlier about people coming in from other countries to do it. What the college is doing has teamed up with, I think it's about 3 very large building and construction companies who have paid for an entire new block to subsidise the education of people learning those practical skills. But alongside that, what I've been able to do, and I'm doing it as a free thing for them, is to allow those young people to develop the other skills that they need. For instance, different people have different preferences in life. So I'll just very quickly talk about a class of plumbers that I was talking with about a year or probably more ago. You can't just say everybody's a plumber and needs to get a plumbing job, because some people were very outgoing by nature, some people are very reticent by nature, some people wanted to work, start their own little enterprise, maybe on their own or with a mate. Some of them wanted maybe to work for small companies, plumbing companies. Some wanted to work for large plumbing organisations. Some of them wanted perhaps even to work within a maintenance department of a large company that might do something else. So what we did was some very simple analysis in a very friendly and non-academic way to define whether people were visualists, auditorists, kinestheticists, left brain, right brain. Won't go into all the details now. And what we were able then to do was say, okay, you want to work on your own, you want to start your own company, the best route for you is, spend a year or 2 doing it with them and then start your own. The people who want to work for big companies, great, here's some opportunities. Now that college has teamed up with the people who can provide the jobs. So it's all joined up thinking. And I have to say that the results that they are getting, not just in plumbing, by the way, but by all other construction, are absolutely phenomenally brilliant. And that's working, and I think that picks up a number of different points, but I'm going to stop there.
Okay, right, then we're going to move on swiftly to unemployment. Let's see, over the last 5 years, I can't remember if 0 hours contracts were about before 2010. But we've certainly seen more of them in the last 5 years. I've never had a 0 hours contract job, and I wouldn't take one. We've seen businesses closing down and redundancies, especially in local councils. The workfare scheme. I haven't got any figures for unemployment because, to me, the figures are unreliable, because the people on the workfare scheme are taken out of the unemployment numbers when they're still claiming state benefits, so technically they are still unemployed. I'm not a fan of workfare. Is anybody else? No?
It's nice to have an impartial chair.
We're also seeing a lot of benefit sanctions, etc. What do people think about sanctions? Have we got anybody that's a fan of sanctions?
No.
Okay. Kind of links back to the last point. Are you talking about capping the welfare benefits?
About what,
Are
sorry?
you talking about capping welfare benefits, right?
No, about sanctions, stopping people's money.
Yeah. Okay. I think the main reason for it is that it stops. Sorry, I know it's the ideology doesn't matter. Like we're still cool, but it stops the. I think you should not be earning more than me if I'm working, because then what incentive do you have to work? So the point of it is that they bring it down to a point where you're not earning more than someone who's working. That's the main point of it. It's meant to be a kick up the backside. And yes, I agree, there are not enough jobs out there. That is the problem with it, but I think the idea of it is a good idea. And then, so there are not enough jobs out there. And my main issue with unemployment is the fact that even when there are jobs out there, a lot of them, in statistics, they won't tell you what kind of jobs they are.
Yeah.
Most of them are, low skilled, no skills, very little money. And, like I said, I'm a conservative, but I'm one that believes in empowering people, and I feel like when we empower you, it shouldn't be that you stay in that position for the rest of your life. It should be something that you get a skill and you're able to elevate and move up in society, up in social mobility. That's what I believe in. But I feel like it's the statistics, they hide behind the statistics that, this has been the lowest rates of unemployment since the 1990s, but a lot of people are probably never going to leave those jobs. They're probably going to stay there.
What you said about the types of jobs available in Doncaster, I can get a job. I can get a job fine in sales. I can go and work in a shop, but that's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I think we need job creation in more
So
sustainable careers.
Links back to education. I feel people need to be able to move up.
Sanctioning though, it's not just, we expect people who are on benefits, with a family, they expect people to apply for a job was actually available for one day. And if they don't apply, they all have their money stopped, they'll get something like £20 for the full week. What are they supposed to do? If they are happy to take low paid jobs, they're happy to take any unskilled jobs. But they're not all that easily available as you think.
I know.
And a lot of people who are desperate to work, they can't get work.
I know, and I agree, but I also feel like when I look at other nations where they don't even have this kind of, people still survive, people still get up and make the most out of what, and people are able to make the most out of what they have, and people build from that. I've seen people build themselves from nothing. My parents built themselves from nothing, and they didn't grow up in nations where they were welfare.
They've got enough money to pay consultants to say, listen, this is what the lowest earning person needs to earn a week. We've got people educated to do that. Why can't they do that and say, listen, this is what we should base our basic rates at? But clearly it isn't enough. £6, was it £6? Was it 20p yesterday?
£6.70 an hour.
Increased by 20p. That's not enough. We can get consultants. You know, the government does all these reports. This report, that report, commission. Why can't the commissioner report say this is what actually the lowest earning person in this country would need to survive? Not even just survive. To live an okay life. This is what the basic salary means. That's what happened. It's just the government saying, a rate that they think it's okay, but it clearly isn't.
Over the last 5 years, then we've seen longer waiting times in A&E. There's obviously been cuts to the funding. In 2011, the Prime Minister spoke about selling our health records to private healthcare companies. He insisted that our details would remain private, and rightly so, but promising that it would yield better healthcare. In the sense that I think it was something to do with research and whatnot. We've also seen backdoor privatisations of parts of the NHS. Does anybody live near an NHS facility that's been privatised, or?
Not yet.
No.
Not yet.
What's your party's stance on health?
What a big subject to cover in 30 seconds. The National Health Service still, by and large, is excellent. What people find, and this is not anecdotal evidence, it's actually empirical evidence, is that emergency medicine is brilliant. If you all go under a bus outside tonight, you'll have an ambulance subject to traffic. No canal ambulances, okay. As soon as is practically possible, you'll have a team of experts at your nearest A&E working brilliantly. That's great. The problem arises particularly with the sort of middle band of things, where people, for instance, have been ill, they're still in hospital, they're not yet well enough to be able to go home, and this is particularly true with a lot of more elderly people, the bed blocking, in other words. And therefore the NHS has to spend more and more money looking after people, and it's very costly to have people in hospital, looking after more and more people who really ought to be in some other kind of care facility, some perhaps permanent. A point about, and this will surprise Whitney when a good old Liberal is coming out with a Conservative line here, the National Health Service has always had part privatisation.
I was going to say that. The Labour government.
It absolutely has.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
think of the bandages. Well, there isn't, you know, a posse of nurses sitting somewhere rolling bandages. We buy them in. The sophisticated machines that cost £11.5 million each, we buy them in. Now, the point about privatisation, I think, that worries people and worries me is the sort of thing, the creeping privatisation, where some private healthcare providers are now being asked to do the routine operations, because that's nice and easy and non-threatening. So if you want a new hip, you can go off to one of the Bupa hospitals paid for by the NHS, and so on and so on. The difficulty then is that the NHS ends up with the much more difficult and much more costly operations. And the other thing about the NHS that we've just got to grasp the nettle of is that people are living longer, and generally the older people are getting, the more healthcare needs they have, and therefore the more expensive it is likely to be. We've just undergone a colossal top-down NHS reorganisation, which I still can't quite figure out, because a gentleman called Cameron 5 years ago said there would not be a top-down reorganisation. But I accept there's quite a lot of people called Cameron in the country, so I may have got it wrong. But what we have to do is to say local, for me regional, healthcare authorities have got to be given the opportunity to develop joined up thinking with the social care provided. And I just happened to be at a meeting yesterday with one of the county, no secrets, Essex County, who are just getting to grips with the fact that, like Scotland has already, we need to join up NHS and social services and talk to each other. And it's going to save an incredible amount of money. The problem is, of course, that it's not something that we can just wave a magic wand at and happen overnight. And it will still require some level of organisation. But essentially, we ought to be looking at regional health. It would be lovely to have an accident and emergency at the end of every road, but you know that ain't going to happen. We need to bite the bullet to say, in some urban areas, do we actually need 3 or 4 accident and emergency units? Do we need to have 3 or 4 maternity units? Or would we be able to provide a better quality of service? I'm not in favour of lowest common denominator, I'm in favour of highest common factor. Will we be able to provide a better quality service without diminishing the, let's say, the ambulance time between a home and an accident emergency by actually grouping together some of the smaller NHS provisions and some of the smaller social service provisions? The other thing, just quickly, and I'd then like to listen to what people say, I have quite a lot to do with the health service, and I'm afraid it is true that a lot of hospitals waste a lot of money, often on things like the bandages and the needles and what have you that they buy in from private sources. I mean, I've gone into rooms where I've seen literally stacked from floor to ceiling with bandages, and you look at the expiry date on them and it was last month. Now, one of the things that I'm very much in favour of is the reintroduction of proper matrons, and I don't care whether it's men or women, you know, it's not the old carry-on film type of matron, but people who are locally there, who know what's happening in their hospital, who don't have to fill in 173 forms in order to order another set of bandages, but who have local budgets, local control of what they need. So just in the same way that we, if we're going out to buy some baked beans, we wouldn't buy 73 boxes. You know, we'd buy a couple of tins.
Yeah.
So things at that kind of level, which you might think is a bit banal, costs a colossal amount of money in pure waste. And I would be much happier to see local and regional organisations meeting the specific healthcare needs of that population, because it will be different in different areas, and why should we have a one-size-fits-all, because that's bonkers. So it's what local people want and need, and I believe that we can provide a better quality service at a lower cost.
I think one of the biggest issues we have for me is probably I think mental health should be put on the same like level of importance as physical health. I think if you're suffering with your mental health, it can be just as damaging, you know, as breaking your leg. As
1 in 4 people throughout their lifetimes.
Yeah,
You know,
1 in 4
colossal
people.
number.
Yeah, it's a huge amount. And it's still really a taboo subject, still really like nobody wants to talk about it.
Well, I'm pleased to see that the current coalition government under Norman Lamb, who's the relevant minister, have just last week announced that they will be ramping up the importance of healthcare.
Yeah.
Because again, if you don't invest in early stage interventions, and this sounds really nasty and economic, but even in economic terms, if you don't invest at the front end when people need it, a year or 2 or 5 later, it's going to cost a hell of a lot more to help them recover.
I'm actually against creeping privatisation. I think its track record has been terrible. It's left hospitals in billions of debt, loads of trusts facing bankruptcy. And
PPP, sorry, is it PPP you're talking about?
Yeah.
Thank you,
So,
I agree with you.
So, and like you were talking about businesses don't care about people. Their main aim is to make profit, and I don't think that's what the health service should be about. It's meant to be about health.
Yeah.
So I'm against,
Well, thank you everyone for coming. It's been great. I've had a good time.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.